Um, so what would you say are the main properties of the guitar that you can actually control in a predictable way?
Well, I'm from the very beginning in thicknessing the plate. I'm trying to control the stiffness and mass. So what we were just talking about. Thicknessing the plate, you're trying to control stiffness and mass. Then the bracing of the plate, you're again trying to control the balance between stiffness and mass. And all of that is sort of in effort trying to control, like we've talked about, the modes of vibration, how efficiently they vibrate, and at what frequency. And all of that is readily sort of controllable. The stiffness and mass of the plate and the frequency at which the modes vibrate. You could say, okay, well, I'm going to take a 100% scientific approach where I'm going to measure the material properties of everything, and I'm going to design and construct the ideal sort of top plate, and subsequently all the modes are going to fall into ideal places. And that's great in theory, but it never works like that. And there's always sort of some adjustment that needs to take place. And that's where the tools like using Chladni patterns and spectrum analysis are indispensable to the scientific luthier, because you can be as accurate as you want in your measurements and calculations, but more often than not, you need to adjust your mass and stiffness to achieve your
Desired result.
modes.
Right. Okay, so when you start any build, you've mentioned quite a few times now that it's all about controlling the mass and the stiffness. But when you start a build, or maybe if you had to describe your ideal guitar, I think that it's obviously a very subjective thing, and I think it's kind of interesting how different people describe what the ideal guitar to them would be.
Yeah.
Especially if it's just in terms of sort of expressive language. But in terms of measurable characteristics, when you set out a build, what are your goals, or what do you aim to achieve?
What I enjoy from a guitar, and this is not to say that everybody does, because everybody's looking for something sort of different. But what I really love from a guitar is I love great volume. I love huge sustain. I appreciate sort of projection, and all of those attributes I really appreciate, not in the sense that the guitar is sort of barking at you, like it's very loud and obnoxious. It's more like you can play, it offers the musician a huge dynamic range where you can play the instrument so softly and quietly, but the instrument, the guitar, the top, and is amplifying your quiet, gentle playing very efficiently, and making it audible for you and your audience. And that's really sort of what I go for. And again, holding that volume, sustain, projection, and making it very even across the fretboard. So you're not playing in one area and the guitar is sounding beautiful, and then you go into another area and it's far weaker, and maybe there's wolf notes or just not sounding as good in that other area. And so I like a balanced sound, and I like sort of crystal clear clarity with a lot of overtones over the notes, which is basically harmonic frequencies. I just like a lot of harmonic frequencies being excited in the guitar body top, so that the note almost has a natural reverb to it.
And so from the measurable properties that give you that, it's your high order modes of vibration in your top and air and back to a lesser extent.
So if you want those beautiful harmonic frequencies, you need a low mass top, and you need it to be thinned out, particularly around the edges, quite thin. The top needs to be thin around the edges. Like on average, my tops in the center are around between 2.6 and 3 millimeters, depending on the top, depending on the model. But the edges of my top get thinned down to about 2 millimeters, or on a smaller instrument, it may even come down to about 1.8 millimeters. And that's what really gets those higher frequencies vibrating efficiently, is sort of low mass, low density top, higher stiffness, so that you can thin out the edges of the top without it becoming too flexible. And that's all in an effort to get you're doing more than just getting those higher frequencies. You're also, by reducing the mass and stiffness of the perimeter of the top, you're lowering the air and top frequency and every subsequent frequency. And so you're lowering all of those very high modes of vibration, but you're also exciting newer, higher frequency modes of vibration.
And I think here again the significance of mass and stiffness come in, where at high frequencies your mass sort of dominates in terms of how responsive something will be. So if you think about a heavy object, if you need to move it back and forth very fast, each time you need to change direction, there's a lot more energy required to change the momentum in the opposite direction. Whereas if you have something light, it doesn't take as much energy. And so by making the top very light, that is the one characteristic that is going to make it perform well at high frequencies. You're always trying to balance your mass and your stiffness, but when you think of your frequency range, your spectrum of sound, mass becomes dominating in the high frequencies, where stiffness is your dominating parameter in your low frequencies.
Yeah, that's where composite materials, particularly carbon fiber,
I just wanted to ask you about that,
can play such a beneficial role in lowering mass and increasing stiffness, and also maintaining structural integrity, because you have the however many pounds of force from the strings pulling on the soundboard, and so you're sort of balancing your mass, your stiffness, and your structural integrity.
So I haven't got into carbon bracing or any carbon really myself, but I think it's interesting. It's interesting to think that it's could be necessary to use carbon in a object or a structure that works perfectly fine with wood, and you can get good results with wood. And it just seems, without getting too deep into it, like using something that's that super strong is going to necessarily mean that everything's going to be overbuilt. But what you're trying to achieve through using that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're trying to achieve the same kind of or similar kind of stiffnesses that you were aiming for when you were using just wood, but now you're able to achieve that stiffness by using a lot less mass. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yeah.